Welcome to more Polyphony Digital Logic. Repeating, blah, blah, blah. It's the same stuff over and over. The penalties are still broken. The balance of power is still off, just now in different ways. Here we go. This has been discussed by other people as usual, but this is just my thoughts on it. To begin with, I'll leave the juicy bit for the last bit, the bit that I've kind of ranted about since the game came out, the penalty system. First, I'll mention something that I have the most experience with this update, and that is actually the tire and fuel consumption, which was supposedly changed too. So here we go. Supposedly tire and fuel consumption got changed, which in theory that means it makes it more balanced. AKA meaning the heavier cars, even though it's realistic for them to wear tires and fuel a bit more, wouldn't do that, and or the balanced power would make this the heavier car slightly faster, which wouldn't really make sense because all races do not have tire and fuel. So I kind of figured what they did is just make it a bit unrealistic, but in a fair way, and make the heavier cars just have less fuel and tire depletion. But, well, here's my findings. This was a long endurance race. This was the FIA Manufacturer Series race at Brands Hatch GP. And this is the leader crossing the finish line. I'm going to go back to each subsequent car for a bit, and I'll show you the tire wear for them. This ain't even necessarily a fuel thing, because people can put in different amounts of fuel, but tires are tires. You only get one set of tires, pretty much. Everybody's going to be using racing hards. But anyway, this is a Porsche in first. There's its tires. Porsche in second. There's its tires. I mean, as y'all can see, there is a difference there. It depends on the driver. It depends on when you pit. I can't exactly remember when these two drivers actually pitted. But maybe it might have been on a different lap. Maybe it's just how they drive. But nonetheless, these are the two Porsches. There you go. Third place is in an Aston Martin, a heavier car. Worst tire, and again, I ain't really gonna mention fuel, but technically fuel too, of the lot. But definitely worst tire wear. Heavier car, worst tire wear, uh-oh. Corvette, kinda in the middle. I think the Porsche is a bit lighter, the Aston's a bit heavier. There's it. That has so much like anime on it, I can barely tell, but I think it's a Mitsubishi, I think. Maybe. Hard to tell at this point, but there's it. It's pretty good. Heavier car being a Corvette, I assume. Lighter car being a Mitsubishi Lancer. Lightest being the Porsche. And then here's my Viper. I don't know if my Viper's heavier or lighter than the Corvette, but I assume they're about the same. And I wouldn't think it's actually as heavy as Aston Martin. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe they're all pretty equal, but it seems like if I remember correctly, the Porsche and the Alpha are the two lightest. Nobody used the Alpha in this race, but so far, the Porsche does seem to have the best tire wear. Here's my Viper. Worst by a whole heck of a heap. I'm going to move up the order now, which in theory, too, up the order has driven more of the track than me, just because, well, they're farther up the track than me, but yet mine are still the worst. Here's mine, and then up the order. There you have it, folks. I mean, that's even pretty obvious going fast. Maybe I'm worse on tires, but as far as I can tell, I'm not really. As I've said before, really about the only time where I'm racing all that aggressive, like to my absolute 100% in longer endurance races is when I'm right behind somebody near the end of the race. And I mean, look, this is near the end of the race. I'm not really by anybody. And I know y'all can call me a pleb, I know you can all call me a cheater, I know you can all call me a noob, whatever. If you want to do that, that's fine, but I use traction control too in endurance races with tire wear fuel consumption. So in theory, that also helps the tires. Yet I still have the worst tire wear in the Viper. And yet they didn't actually change the balance power for the Viper to make it better too. And then here's 7th too, I just threw that in to say it's not just every driver lower ends up getting gradually worse, because in theory that means they drive gradually worse, because that Corvette has better tires than me, but yet is lower in the order. But anyway, here's the balance of power to prove the first point. They didn't actually make the Viper any faster, really. Here's the Group 4 balance. Actually, this is a Group 4 balance of power. I forgot the order in which I did these. But anyway, no Viper. They didn't change it whatsoever. But yet, either they didn't change its tire and fuel because it seems like in the past it was pretty bad, or they even made it worse. It's kind of hard to tell because they changed other ones too, so there's different comparisons to the rest, but yeah, whatever they did, it didn't work. And it sold in the race too. I mean, again, different drivers race differently, but for about the first 2 laps after we all pitted, which was thereabouts the end of lap 8. I think maybe a few drivers did differently, but I think us both pitted at the end of lap 8. That driver came out maybe half a second ahead of me. By about lap 10, I was right on that driver's back bumper. By lap 12, it was about half a second again, and then, well, now it's this coming to the last lap. So it's not just an aesthetic, too. I mean, the car is still drivable. It's understeery, but it's not out of control or anything. I'm not about to wreck it, but it is definitely slower. And then here's the laps as well. By the end, I was sort of kind of slowing down anyway, just because I wasn't near anybody and I didn't want to mess up, but still, it was obviously slower. Anyway, moving on from that, again, maybe it's just a Viper that they didn't do anything on, but the Viper's the only one I've used, so, I mean, that's what I can judge best on. I don't want to make an assumption on any other cars because I just don't know much about them, because the Viper's the Group 4 that I use the most. So whatever, I have a hunch though, the Alpha 4C is incredibly overpowered now because, well, just look at its balance of power now. Again, haven't driven it, but I mean, Jiminy Cricket, they made it faster. It was already pretty overpowered. I mean, probably the most overpowered is the M4. They detuned it, and they uptuned the Corvette a bit, but they made the 4C worse. But anyway, moving on to just the updates, which is supposed to fix things, broke things. I mean, this happens sometimes in all games, but I mean, holy snikes. I don't really care about this one, but this is apparently everybody. Or at least random bit of everybody. There's no particular circumstances where you do or don't get this. In some cases, cursor sounds, menu music, tire screeching, and collision noise are not played by the game. Music is not that big a deal because really you can just, as far as I know, with the PS4 play your own music. I've never done it, but I had that in the PS3. I would hope the PS4 can do that. And then cursor sounds, honestly, barely even noticed. It's been the same for a while. But this actually affects racing. Tire screeching and collision noise. Especially the collision noise, because here's where you may get triggered. Because people seem to not like when people talk about penalties. And this is going to be a talk about penalties. Collision noise involves penalties. Here we go, folks. If you don't like talking about penalties, leave the video now. 3, 2, 1. This is penalty talk now. Here we go. I'm just going to read this off, and then I'll just go from there on my opinions of it. I'll go ahead and say this right now. The reason why I did the tire wear first is because that's the one that I have the most experience with. I have seen the penalties with 1.15, but I've seen the tire wear a lot more visibly. I've only seen like 2 or 3 drivers in instances that would be penalties. I've kind of saw everybody in a way with the tire wear. So I'm not as knowledgeable with this, but I have seen it in its horrible, glaring bit in previous updates. So I'm pretty much knowledgeable in that instance. But anyway, here we go. If a car pushes another car into the wall, the penalty applied to the player of the car that causes the incident will now be more severe. Okay then, that makes sense. You penalize the wrecker more. But what it didn't say here, say here. And this is words, not how the game works, so therefore it's flat out logic. Somebody had to type this out. It didn't say that the car that gets hit into the wall doesn't get a penalty. It didn't say that. Again, that's part of it that I haven't seen for myself yet. But just by how they worded it, that in and of itself is a PD logic. How can you penalize the car that gets wrecked? Yes, it makes perfect sense to penalize the wrecker more, but you shouldn't penalize a car that gets wrecked at all. Plain and simple, no further explanation needed. How does PD not understand this, or can they just not do this? Either way, it's their own PD logic. Either they don't have a system in place that can physically do this, even though games have had penalty systems for probably 10 plus years now. I don't think iRacing is a new game, and it seems like even in the old NASCAR games, they had like the black flags and stuff, which are relatively realistic. This cannot even get someone getting wrecked right. They penalize them too. According to their own words, they're not even trying to hide their own PD logic at this point. They're either too inept to fix it or don't care. They can't fix it or they don't want to fix it. Either way, that's downright terrible. Moving on. In a collision between two cars, the car behind will no longer receive a more severe penalty. This can be a good thing or this can be a bad thing. If somebody wrecks in front of you and you can't do anything about it, then you won't have a more severe penalty for doing nothing wrong. But guess what? Even if someone does wreck in front of you and you hit that car in front of you, that shouldn't be a penalty in the first place. But there are a whole heck of a heap more instances in which there can be a front car and a rear car involving a collision. The next one would be if the front car is just straight up slow and brakes way early, and it's not really just dive bombing by the rear driver, it's just you wasn't really expecting that. That's good. Okay then, I still don't necessarily think the rear car should get a penalty for that, but that's more acceptable than the first instance I said. The third instance, well, this is where it's broken. Dive bombing. Y'all know what that is by now. I'm sure y'all probably been on the bad end of it. Y'all may have been on the doing end of it. I've been on both, but again, I only dive bomb if the room says it's dirty or if somebody does it to me first. Pretty much this means you can dive bomb, just straightforward. From what it sounds like, y'all both get the same penalty, but still, that also means the dive bomb E still gets a penalty. I think dive bomb R versus dive bomb E is basically this first situation, because you can dive bomb someone into the wall. Either, again, it's kind of the same thing. They don't have the ability to fix it, or they just don't care to. Don't get it. I'm not a game developer, but this seems like a pretty simple fix. Granted, this one has a few situations, but this stuff has existed in racing for as long as racing has existed. You'd think by now they could think of something for it. But anyway, moving on. Dive bombing is perfectly fine now. That's what we learned from this. And then moving on. A time penalty will no longer be applied to cars spinning out of control. Okay, so that's good. Maybe that means if you get dive bombing and wreck but don't hit a wall, you won't get a penalty. And then the dive bomber will get a penalty. Wait, nope, they won't. Because this. Let's think of a situation in which the car who's not at fault actually has it better then. I guess if someone wrecks in front... No, because if they wreck in front of you and spin out, they don't get a penalty as well. Well, here's a situation where it works as it should, kind of, sort of, but it still hurts both of them because they both get in a wreck. The car behind isn't doing anything wrong, and it gets hit by a car spinning in front. Supposedly, the car spinning in front doesn't get a penalty now, and then the car in back won't either, as long as neither of them touch a wall. So that works out as it should. But I can't actually think of a situation in where, say, someone racing dirty actually has a more severe racing than someone racing as they should be. I can't actually think of one. There's not, really. They've still yet to put in a situation that doesn't encourage dirty driving. If you could say, even if the dirty driver gets a penalty, if they wreck the clean driver in front and the clean driver gets the same penalty, the dirty driver still wins. From what I've seen from these circumstances, it either comes out as equal or the dirty driver wins. If someone wants to race dirty, they're at least not going to lose anything more than sportsmanship rating. They may very well still be able to win the race. Moving on, still broken. No penalties for collisions will be applied while time penalty is counting down. Hallelujah, but in theory, that means that you can just pretty much brake check. Granted, that means the driver behind won't get a penalty either, but still, nonetheless, if you brake check, you gain speed, the other driver loses speed, so you still win for racing dirty. And then in a future update, we plan to make cars under such conditions semi-transparent. That's good. That means in a future update, the brake checking shouldn't happen when leading a penalty. But that's in a future update. This is now, so this is still broken. That means the front car trying to lead a penalty, whether it's fair or not, more times than not it's not fair, but still, the front car can just brake check the rear car now, and while granted the rear car won't get a penalty anymore, it will still be slowed down. Guess what's going to happen at Blue Moon now? Car in front brake checks, gains 20 miles an hour, the car in back loses 20 miles an hour. The car in front deletes its penalty. The car in back, it won't get a penalty, yay, but it will still be net 40 miles an hour down. Still broken. Moving on. This, I think, is the last thing. Cars overlap behind will now be ghosted depending on the distance from the player's car. I thought they already had that. I don't know what that means. But as long as it's the same or better than last update, whatever. That's the only good thing that came out of 1.13, and then 1.14 is basically the same. As I said, they didn't change anything. Was lap cars are ghost. Yay, that's the one thing they did do right. Other than that, though, everything about this update is still either broken or contradictory. There's really nothing more to say about that. They've broken some stuff. They've made wheels not work. They've made sounds not work. They've made balance of power no better that I can see. Again, that's just my opinion on that. I haven't driven every car, but at least they've made the balance of power on the Viper no better. And for everyone, because everyone should, in theory, get the same penalties for doing the same stuff. That shouldn't be biased. They still made it to where the clean driver can't win. There are some instances where the clean driver can come out even at this point, but they still can't win. I don't get it. This is the straight up PD logic because someone typed this out. The others have different situations to them, but as far as I know, I went through all of the general situations. Lag is unpredictable, so I ain't going to go into that. I will say that at least from my experience with bad internet, GT Sport servers have been one of the more solid games I've played. That's one of the few good things about GT Sport Online is their servers are alright. I have a hunch that has to do is I bet they made the online to where it could probably take a whole heck of a heap of more people than are actually on there. AKA meaning GT Sport didn't sell as good as they thought it would. Well, whatever, hey, for the people that actually bought the game, that's kind of a benefit in the sense that it makes online run smooth. So I have no idea how lag is going to affect all this, is what I'm saying. But from all the situations that would happen in real racing, the vast majority of situations are incorrect of how it would turn out in real racing. And this brings me to my final point. Supposedly, the actual non-test session events will be starting very soon. AKA meaning supposedly, I don't think the actual details have been announced yet. Maybe they'll be announced once it actually starts, whenever that is. But from what I can tell, it's going to be soon. From what they said at the beginning, it's going to be soon. These are going to be the events that actually make real race car drivers. As of now, there are quite literally real race car drivers. I'm not going to say their names because maybe their opinions have changed or whatever. Maybe they won't want me to, but I've mentioned it in other videos, and I haven't seen anything where the views would change at this point. Real race car drivers are boycotting this penalty system. And yet soon, PD is supposedly going to be deciding real race car drivers upon how well they do in races involving the penalty system. I don't think it's going to be like GT Academy where it's going to be a time trial thing. As far as I know, this will be decided by racing each other on track where contact can be made and the penalties will be fair or unfair depending on the contact. Granted, the best drivers in the world may be able to avoid it, on average better than the average driver by default. But we've already seen, for those of y'all who watch some of the YouTube videos of the top drivers, no one, even the absolute best, are perfect, and they still receive, at least in my opinion, and I'm pretty sure in their opinion too, some of them's even said it, stupid penalties. They still receive them, and they're the best there are. I'm just going to wait and see how this goes. This may be the end of GT Sport if it's an absolute failure. And they see just PD is not capable of actually making a simulatory game in the sense of how they want to do it now. And then maybe they just move back to the old format no one had that big of a problem with, that sold better and had higher ratings and did better in almost all the ways. The only real benefit of GT Sport is maybe the FIA thing can actually get more real race car drivers. But as of now, their system's making it where it's impossible to race like real life right now. So it's completely contradictory, and at this point, it's probably going to fail. Maybe that will end up being a good thing. Maybe it will be a wake-up call for PD, but maybe not, and then this is only going to hurt everyone. Hope for the best, expect the whatever you want. I ain't even going to say worst, because worst is an ABBA holder as well. But whatever you expect, whatever you hope for, the penalties don't care. They're going to do whatever, no matter what you expect or hope. So, I wish you luck, but penalties don't care about luck either. So, there's nothing at this point you can do. Just hope and wait, and even hope doesn't help at this point. Really about the only way to completely avoid penalties is ride in the back away from everyone else or try to run away at front. In theory, both will be impossible when the top people are racing each other. Because if you ride around in the back, there's no point in being there in the first place. You're not going to get anything. And you most likely ain't going to run away if you're racing the best in the world. I don't see a way of this being successful. Do y'all? Leave it in the comments if you do. At this point, I'm kind of tired of saying leave in the comments how you think this system is good. Because I think the majority actually think it's don't, and I don't even think it's me at this point. It's gone on so long, I think it truly and really is the majority. So, yeah. What do y'all think will happen when PD actually makes real race car drivers? Do you think it's just going to be whoever gets the least penalties and not actually the most deserving driver? Do y'all think the drivers are just going to put aside their scariness of the penalties and just kind of not even attempt to pass and just whoever wins the time trial, qualifier, whatever they end up calling it is who wins it? Or do y'all think it's going to be some type of combination that makes everyone mad and just quit in general? I don't know, folks, but it will be interesting and probably bad. Interesting in a bad way, could be worth doing something on, I don't know. I ain't saying I'm going to be with the top drivers, but I will say I'll watch them and then make my own opinion of it, because I'm pretty sure there's some drivers out there who have YouTube channels who will make it. So, yeah, that's about it, folks. This update hasn't solved much, and then some errors have made stuff worse, and it's about to become the official bit where race car drivers are actually going to be made, supposedly. I don't think this is going to be worth a yeehaw. I really don't. The only way I can see this being worth a yeehaw is if PD gives up on the sport bit and just goes on to 7. In that instance, it's very much worth a yeehaw, but TT7's still not planned.